Judge,
I am a federal judge. You can confirm that immediately.
credentials don't put you above investigation.
I am asking you to verify before escalating this.
You think because you've got a title and a big house in this neighborhood that nobody's going to question you?
Below is the full English version with the main character changed to a white American woman, while keeping the story structure, tone, and events the same. I am a federal judge. You can confirm that immediately. Credentials don't put you above investigation. I am asking you to verify before escalating this. You think because you've got a title and a big house in this neighborhood, nobody's going to question you? At 5:47 a.m. on Saturday, March 1st, 2026, 12 armed Homeland Security investigations agents in full tactical gear executed a no-knock raid on a quiet residential home in Silver Spring, Maryland. A flashbang grenade shattered the living room window before the front door had even been touched. Then came the battering ram. The door splintered inward on the first hit. Agents flooded the hallway shouting commands. Adi boots shaking the floor hard enough to knock framed photos off the walls. Judge Barbara Whitaker Ames was pulled from her bed in pajamas and thrown face first onto the hallway floor. Her wrists were zip-tied behind her back before she could finish a sentence. Down the hall, her 16-year-old daughter, Rosalind, was forced to the ground at gunpoint in her own bedroom. Body cam footage would later show the girl's face frozen in terror, a rifle barrel inches from her head. In the next room, 11-year-old Noah stood paralyzed against his bookshelf, tears streaming down his face, a dark stain spreading down his pajama pants. Barbara's voice cut through the chaos, steady despite the pressure on her spine. I'm a federal judge. I'm a sitting United States federal judge. The agent kneeling on her back didn't flinch. Sure you are. Senior Agent Craig Loomis stood in the doorway of the bedroom, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold like a man observing routine work. He said nothing. He didn't need to. He had authorized every second of this. Craig Loomis was 46 years old, with 18 years in federal law enforcement and a career built almost entirely on post-9/11 fear. He had made his name running counterintelligence operations that targeted immigrant communities and professionals with tenuous or outright fabricated links to foreign governments. 7 of his previous operations had collapsed before reaching trial due to lack of evidence. Not one of those failures resulted in discipline. 2 former colleagues had filed internal complaints alleging that Loomis manufactured evidence and pressured informants into giving false statements. And both complaints landed on the desk of Supervisory Special Agent Donna Kessler, his section chief. Both were dismissed. Kessler had co-signed nearly every major warrant Loomis had pursued over the past 6 years. Among his peers, Loomis was known for what supervisors politely called big swings, high-profile raids designed to generate press attention and justify budget lines rather than produce convictions. He had been chasing a promotion to Assistant Special Agent in charge for 2 years. He needed a headline case. And when Barbara Whitaker Ames's name surfaced during a routine intelligence sweep, Loomis decided she was it. Judge Barbara Whitaker Ames was born in Baltimore to white American parents with long careers in education and public service. Her father taught biology at a community college. Her mother worked as a hospital administrator. Barbara earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Virginia, then her law degree from Harvard, where she graduated in the top 5% of her class. She clerked for a federal appellate judge on the Fourth Circuit, then spent 8 years as a prosecutor at the Department of Justice, specializing in national security cases, the very field Craig Loomis now worked in. 4 years earlier, she had been appointed to the federal bench for the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Senate confirmed and widely respected across the legal profession for her fairness, her sharp intellect, and her willingness to check government overreach in surveillance and civil liberties cases. Her husband, Dr. Charles Ames, a cardiologist, had passed away 2 years earlier from pancreatic cancer. Since then, Barbara had been raising Rosalind and Noah alone, balancing a demanding caseload with school pickups, Sunday church, and the quiet grief of a household that still had his reading glasses resting on the nightstand. She was deeply private, deeply principled, and deeply rooted in her community. She was also, in every measurable way, exactly the kind of person the system was supposed to protect. Instead, the system sent Craig Loomis. 3 months before the raid, Loomis flagged Barbara's name during a broad intelligence review of individuals with what the agency internally labeled connections to nations of concern. Her connection was this: her late father, a biology professor who had died in 2016, had traveled once to Tehran in 1994 to attend an academic medical conference. That single trip, more than 30 years earlier by a dead man, became the seed of the entire case. Loomis built an affidavit alleging that Barbara maintained undisclosed foreign contacts with Iranian intelligence assets. He cited wire transfers she had sent to elderly relatives overseas as financial activity consistent with covert channels. He pointed to her professional travel to The Hague for a judicial conference, a trip organized by the U.S. State Department, and described it as indicative of clandestine meetings with foreign operatives. Every claim in the affidavit was either a deliberate distortion or an outright fabrication. No corroborating intelligence existed from the CIA, the NSA, or the FBI. No other agency had flagged her name, and no confidential informant had provided testimony. Loomis submitted the warrant application to Magistrate Judge Howard Pruitt, a 61-year-old jurist with a reputation for moving fast through his docket. Pruitt signed the warrant after a 9-minute review. He asked 0 questions. He requested no supporting documentation beyond the affidavit itself. And with that signature, 12 armed agents were authorized to break down the door of a sitting federal judge and drag her from her bed in front of her children. For 3 hours and 14 minutes, agents moved through every room of Barbara Ames's home with the efficiency of men who believed they were untouchable. Body cam footage from multiple agents would later document what they seized: laptops from the home office, cell phones from the kitchen counter and both children's bedrooms, on family photo albums pulled from a living room shelf, Barbara's judicial case files, binders and folders containing active federal proceedings, carried out in open boxes without covers or seals, her children's tablets, financial records from a filing cabinet in the hallway, her late husband's medical files, still kept in a drawer beside his side of the bed, and a box of personal letters her father had written to her mother over the course of 40 years. The same letters Loomis had described in his affidavit as coded communications. Barbara sat zip-tied in a kitchen chair the entire time, still in pajamas, watching agents dismantle her home around her. She asked 4 times to call her attorney. Each time she was told the request would be processed later. She asked 3 times for her children to be brought to her, but each request was denied without explanation. Down the hall, Rosalind sat in her parents' bedroom with an agent by the door, sobbing, asking over and over if her mother was being arrested. No one answered her. In his own room, Noah sat on the floor with his back against the bed, guarded by an armed agent in tactical gear, clutching a stuffed bear his father had given him. He did not speak. He did not move. Loomis personally entered Barbara's home office and began reading through her judicial case files. When a younger agent standing nearby asked quietly whether they should be handling court documents, Loomis did not hesitate. "She's not a judge today. She's a suspect." 3 minutes after the first flashbang shattered Barbara's living room window, Bill Travers was standing on his porch across the street in a bathrobe and slippers. A phone raised, recording. Travers was 68 years old, a retired firefighter with 30 years of service and the kind of instinct that told him when something was deeply wrong. He had seen the tactical vehicles pull onto the block at 5:44 a.m. He had watched a dozen agents in helmets and body armor pour out and stack up along the front of the house. And when the grenade went off and the door came down, he pressed record. Over the next 2 hours, his phone captured everything visible from the street. Agents moving in and out carrying boxes, evidence bags clearly containing children's electronics, small tablets, and laptops sealed in clear plastic. At one point, 53 minutes into the footage, an agent walking toward a vehicle held up a framed family photograph and said something to a colleague that made both of them laugh. Travers caught the moment Rosalind's face appeared briefly in a second-floor window, tears visible even from a distance, before an agent pulled the curtain shut from inside. He walked toward the perimeter once and asked an agent what was happening. He was told to return to his residence immediately. He stepped back, but he kept recording. He did not go inside. That evening, sitting in his kitchen with the footage still on his phone, Travers told a reporter something he would repeat in every interview that followed. I spent 30 years running into burning buildings. I've seen houses raided for drugs. I've seen bad situations. But I have never in my life seen anything like what they did to that woman and those kids. And I knew right then somebody needed to see this. At 9:15 a.m., 3 hours and 28 minutes after the first agent crossed her threshold, Barbara Whitaker Ames was finally permitted one phone call. She dialed Olivia Hanley, her attorney and one of her closest friends, a constitutional law specialist who had known her since their years together at Harvard. Body cam footage from the agent standing nearest the kitchen captured the call. Barbara's voice was controlled, measured, almost clinical. The voice of a woman trained to function under pressure. But the camera also captured what her voice did not betray. Tears running down both cheeks, her jaw tight, her zip-tied hands trembling against the kitchen table. They broke into my house. They terrorized my children. They are calling me an Iranian spy. I need you here now. Hanley arrived in 40 minutes. She walked through the damaged front door in a suit, briefcase in hand, and identified herself immediately as counsel for Judge Ames. Loomis, standing in the living room reviewing a stack of seized documents, barely looked up. Hanley stepped closer and spoke clearly enough for every body cam in the room to record it. My client is a sitting United States federal district judge for the District of Columbia. You have seized active judicial case files from her home office. That is an unconstitutional violation of the separation of powers and judicial independence. The room went quiet. Agent Bryce Dillingham, standing near the hallway, looked at Loomis. Two agents near the front door exchanged a glance. Loomis's expression did not change, but his hand stopped moving over the papers in front of him. "We'll verify that," he said. Hanley's response was immediate. "You should have verified it before you put a flashbang through her window." Loomis stepped into the backyard and called his section chief, Donna Kessler. He kept his voice low. Kessler ran the name through the Federal Judiciary Personnel Database. The confirmation came back in under 2 minutes. Barbara Whitaker Ames. Confirmed sitting judge, United States District Court for the District of Columbia. Appointed by the President of the United States. Senate confirmed. Active caseload of more than 60 pending federal cases. The ambient audio from a body cam still recording in the kitchen picked up Kessler's voice through the phone speaker, tight and clipped. "Craig, what have you done?" Loomis said nothing for several seconds. Then he walked back inside and told his team to begin wrapping up. He did not apologize to Barbara. He did not order her zip ties removed immediately. He did not instruct agents to return the judicial case files. Instead, he stepped outside again, pulled out his personal cell phone and made a second call off body cam. No record exists of who he called or what was said. When he returned to the kitchen, he addressed Hanley in the flat tone of a man still trying to control a situation that had already left his hands. "The investigation is ongoing. Seized materials will be reviewed and returned if appropriate." Hanley was already standing, her briefcase open, a legal pad filled with notes. She looked directly at Loomis, her voice steady and precise. "You have just raided a federal judge's home on fabricated evidence, seized constitutionally protected judicial files, and terrorized her children. This is not going to be reviewed. This is going to be investigated. But not by you." At approximately 10 a.m., more than 4 hours after the raid began, an agent finally cut the zip ties from Barbara Ames's wrists. The plastic had left deep red grooves in her skin. She did not rub them. She stood, walked to the hallway and asked for her children. Noah was brought to her first. The 11-year-old crossed the kitchen at a run and wrapped both arms around her waist so tightly she had to brace herself against the counter. He did not let go for nearly 20 minutes. He did not speak. Rosalind came next, led by an agent she refused to look at. She sat down in a kitchen chair, folded her hands in her lap, and stared at the wall. She said nothing. Her eyes were dry and distant in a way that unsettled Hanley more than the tears had. And the house looked like it had been torn apart by people who did not care what they broke. Furniture was overturned. Drawers had been pulled out and emptied onto floors. Closets stood open with clothes dragged from hangers. Her late husband's study, the room she had kept exactly as he left it, had been ransacked. His books had been pulled from shelves, his desk drawers dumped. In the upstairs hallway, a framed photograph of her parents' wedding lay face down on the carpet, the glass cracked in a long diagonal line. Barbara walked through every room with Hanley beside her, documenting the damage with her phone. She did not cry again. Her voice was flat, precise, cataloging each violation like evidence. They took the kids' laptops. They took my case files. They took the letters my father wrote to my mother. By 11 a.m., Ia Hanley was on the phone with the chief judge of the D.C. District Court. By noon, the Judiciary's administrative office had been formally notified. By 2 p.m., a written complaint had been filed with the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General. By evening, 3 United States senators had been quietly briefed by senior judicial officials. The machinery of accountability had begun to move. But inside the house, Noah was still holding on to his mother, and Rosalyn had not said a word. On the morning of March 2nd, 2026, Bill Travers sent his footage to a reporter at a local television station. He had not slept. By midday, the story was everywhere. Every major outlet ran some version of the same headline, and each one landed harder than the last. Homeland Security raids federal judge's home, calls her Iranian spy. White American federal judge zip-tied an own home during pre-dawn raid. HSY agents seized active judicial case files during raid on judge's home. Legal analysts went on air within hours, calling it one of the most egregious violations of judicial independence in modern American history. Former federal prosecutors described the seizure of active case files as an act that struck at the foundation of the separation of powers. Civil rights organizations issued formal statements demanding a full federal investigation. The Federal Judges Association, a body that almost never comments publicly on individual cases, released a rare and sharply worded condemnation. Social media erupted. The body cam footage had not yet been released, but Travers's exterior video was viewed more than 4 million times by nightfall. One frame in particular spread faster than any other. Agents in tactical gear carrying labeled evidence boxes down the front steps of the house, while in a second-floor window above them, the face of a child was barely visible behind a curtain, mouth open, crying. That image became the defining picture of the case. By late afternoon, HSI leadership moved. Senior Agent Craig Loomis and Supervisory Special Agent Donna Kessler were both placed on administrative leave pending internal review. Magistrate Judge Howard Pruitt, who had signed the warrant after 9 minutes and 0 questions, issued no public comment. But by evening, sources close to the court confirmed he had retained personal legal counsel. The silence from Pruitt's chambers said more than any statement could have. On the afternoon of March 2nd, Judge Olivia Hanley filed an emergency motion to unseal and challenge the search warrant affidavit that had authorized the raid on Barbara Ames's home. A federal judge in the neighboring District of Maryland granted the motion within hours, citing extraordinary circumstances involving the constitutional integrity of the judiciary. By evening, the affidavit was public, and when legal analysts began reading it on live television, what they found was not an intelligence case. It was a fabrication held together by distortion and audacity. The Iranian connections that Loomis had cited as the foundation of his case amounted to a single trip to Tehran in 1994 by Barbara's late father, a biology professor attending an academic medical conference who had been dead for a decade. The covert financial channels were routine wire transfers, fully documented and tax reported, sent to elderly relatives overseas. The clandestine meetings at The Hague referred to Barbara's attendance at a judicial conference organized by the United States State Department itself. She had been formally invited by the federal government to attend the very event Loomis described as evidence of espionage. There was no confidential informant named anywhere in the document. No corroborating intelligence from the CIA, the NSA, or the FBI. No interagency coordination of any kind. Loomis had built the entire case from open-source records, deliberate mischaracterizations of lawful activity, and his own unsubstantiated assertions presented as fact. Former federal prosecutors appeared on every major network, calling it the thinnest affidavit they had ever seen approved by a sitting magistrate. And questions mounted quickly about Howard Pruitt's 9-minute review, whether he had read the document at all, and whether the rubber stamping of a warrant this baseless represented its own form of institutional failure. By the evening of March 2nd, the legal filings were done, the phone calls to senators had been made, and the news cycle was burning with her name. But inside the house in Silver Spring, none of that reached the two children trying to sleep in bedrooms that no longer felt safe. Rosalind had spoken fewer than a dozen words since the morning of the raid. She flinched at sudden sounds, the creak of a door, a car engine outside, the neighbor's dog barking. She asked her mother once, quietly, standing in the hallway before bed, "Are they going to come back?" Barbara told her no. But the question hung in the air, because Barbara could not promise it with the certainty her daughter needed. Noah had not slept through the night since March 1st. He had begun wetting the bed again, something he had not done since he was 5 years old. On the night of March 2nd, as Barbara tucked him in, he looked up at her with an expression no 11-year-old should carry and asked, "Did you do something bad, Mom?" Barbara held his face in both hands and told him no. She told him she had done nothing wrong. She told him the people who came to their house had made a mistake, but she could see in his eyes that the answer did not land the way it needed to, because the damage was not about information. It was about what had been taken from him, the belief that his home was a place where nothing could hurt him. After both children were in bed, Barbara closed her bedroom door, sat on the edge of the mattress, and called her sister in Baltimore. Her voice, the same voice that had stayed level through zip ties, interrogation, and emergency federal motions, finally broke. "They didn't just raid my house. They stole my children's sense of safety. I don't know how to give it back." A child psychologist who would later evaluate both Rosalind and Noah would describe their symptoms as consistent with acute trauma disorder. The report would note hypervigilance, sleep disruption, emotional withdrawal, and regressive behavior. It would note that these symptoms had been caused not by an accident or a natural disaster, but by agents of their own government in their own home in the dark. As of March 3rd, 2026, the machinery of accountability was turning. But no one had yet been held to account. Multiple investigations were now open simultaneously, each pulling at a different thread of the same catastrophic failure. The Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General launched a formal probe into Senior Agent Craig Loomis, Agent Bryce Dillingham, Supervisory Special Agent Donna Kessler, and the full approval chain that had authorized the warrant. The Department of Justice Inspector General opened a separate investigation into whether the raid constituted an obstruction of judicial function, a question with constitutional implications that reached far beyond a single case. The Judicial Conference of the United States, the policy-making body for the entire federal court system, convened an emergency session focused specifically on the seizure of active case files from a sitting judge's home. In a statement released that morning, the conference called the seizure a direct assault on the independence of the federal judiciary. The FBI opened a parallel criminal inquiry into whether Loomis had fabricated evidence in the affidavit, which, if proven, would constitute a federal crime carrying significant prison time. Congressional leaders from both parties demanded hearings. Letters were sent to the DHS Secretary, the Attorney General, and the Director of National Intelligence requesting full briefings. Loomis, through his attorney, released a single statement claiming he had acted in good faith based on available intelligence. Kessler did not comment publicly. Dillingham reportedly retained separate counsel and requested to cooperate with investigators. Magistrate Judge Howard Pruitt was quietly recused from all pending cases on his docket. And the seized judicial files, the active case documents taken from Barbara Ames's home office, had still not been returned. Among her colleagues on the federal bench, Barbara Whitaker Ames was described the same way by nearly everyone who knew her work. Principled, thorough, fearless when it mattered. Over 4 years on the bench, she had built a record that earned respect from prosecutors and defense attorneys alike. But it was her rulings on government surveillance that drew the most attention. She had written multiple opinions pushing back on overreach by federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security. She had questioned the scope of warrantless data collection. She had demanded specificity in affidavits where other judges accepted vague language. 2 of her Fourth Amendment opinions had been cited by appellate courts as models of constitutional reasoning. She had, in short, done exactly what a federal judge is supposed to do. She held power accountable. And now, legal commentators across the country were asking the question openly, was this really an intelligence failure? Or was it retaliation? Was a white American federal judge who dared to check federal authority made into a target by the very apparatus she had held to account? No direct evidence of retaliation had emerged. Not yet. But the investigation was ongoing, and the coincidence had not gone unnoticed by anyone paying attention. Barbara herself did not speak publicly. She did not appear on camera. She did not give interviews. Through Olivia Hanley, she released a single written statement on the evening of March 2nd. I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. On March 1st, agents of the federal government broke into my home and violated that Constitution in front of my children. I intend to ensure that every person responsible is held accountable. Not for my sake, but because if they can do this to a federal judge, they can do it to anyone. This story is not finished. As of March 3rd, 2026, no one had been charged, no one had been fired, no one had been arrested. The judicial case files seized from Barbara Ames's home remained in government custody. Active federal proceedings handled by agents who had no legal right to touch them. Barbara's children still were not sleeping through the night. Rosalind still flinched when a door closed too hard. Noah still crawled into his mother's bed before dawn, afraid of the dark in a way he never had been before. Craig Loomis was on paid administrative leave, collecting a federal salary from his home, while the woman whose door he broke down tried to explain to an 11-year-old why the people who were supposed to protect them were the ones who came with guns. The investigations were open. The Inspector General was reviewing. The FBI was examining. Congress was demanding answers. But the process was slow, deliberate, and offered no comfort to a family still living in a house with a front door that no longer locked properly and a living room window still boarded up with plywood where a flashbang grenade had come through before sunrise on a Saturday morning. The public was watching. The legal community was watching. Civil rights organizations were watching. And somewhere in a quiet house in Silver Spring, Maryland, a federal judge was sitting on the edge of her daughter's bed, smoothing her hair, telling her it was safe to close her eyes, knowing she could not yet prove that was true. This is not a story with a resolution. Not yet. But the cameras were rolling. The body cam footage exists. The neighbor's video exists. The affidavit is public. The evidence is preserved. And the people responsible have names, badges, and records that are now under a level of scrutiny they never imagined possible. Because when they planned this raid, when they drafted that warrant, when they threw that grenade and broke down that door, they assumed the woman in pajamas on the hallway floor was no one who mattered. They were wrong.